running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100? Thank you for joining me today here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you finish your first 100-mile race. My name is Jacob Bateman, and today I am joined by an ultra running coach for one of our Pillars of Ultra Running episodes. That's right, these are the episodes that we've created to help give you all the technical and training advice that you need and so that you can finish your first 100-mile race. Now, Kilian is a very accomplished ultra runner himself. He's won the DC Peaks 50-mile race. He's won the Mogollon Monster 100-mile race. He's taken third at the Ouray 100. That's a race with over 40,000 feet of vert. And he's taken second at the Bigfoot 200, as well as finishing the Cocodona 250. So this man has been around the block. And I had a great conversation with Kilian, and what we were able to talk about was Speedwork and why Speedwork is important, what it does for your body, and how you can implement Speedwork into your training and at what rate. We were able to really dive into the nitty-gritty of this so that you yourself might have a good foundation to start working on getting some speed work in, as it will bless your training and bless your 100-mile effort if you are able to do that. Now, on top of that, with Kilian, we were able to talk a little bit about his DC Peaks experience. He came on the podcast previously when we did our mini series on the DC Peaks, and so he gave us a little recap about how his race went. And lastly, we talked about something that most people in the ultra world will not talk about or might not like. Specifically, we were able to talk about why the why part of running 100 miles is overrated. That's right. Kilian thinks the why is overrated. And so anyways, he's got great reasons behind it. Honestly, a very enlightening podcast. Anyways, I'll stop talking. Let's get to it. Kilian Korth. All right, Kilian, welcome back to the podcast. This time more in a formal Trail to 100 format. If you guys missed it, Kilian came on in our mini series that we did on the DC Peaks 50-mile race just before you ran that. So I appreciate you coming back on as a coach this time.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
Kilian, I guess, we probably have a lot of listeners who heard your preview for DC Peaks. Give us a little recap. What happened on race day?
So it didn't go well. I was actually doing all right. I was moving okay for like 20 miles to Farmington Canyon. And the whole time, though, I was kind of having just discomfort in my stomach that was unusual. I think every runner is going to deal with typical stomach problems at some point where you're just pulling over more often than you want to be or things like that. But I was having this weird bloating sensation and just like feeling a little bit nauseous. And then I left Farmington Canyon,
so it's at 20 miles-ish, right?
I think it's like 21. So yeah,
okay.
Right around there. But let's go 20 miles. I left Farmington Canyon, pulled over on the side of the road because I had to poop, and then just a bunch of bloody diarrhea was the end result there. Kind of funny. I had signal for a second. I sent my friend who's an ER doctor a text that literally said, bloody diarrhea equals hospital, ? And then, so I talked to her about like what could be going on. And I was a little dehydrated too, even though I'd been hydrating as normal. And so we were worried about something being wrong with my kidneys, like some sort of function internally being awry. And so I decided to call it quits. It was alarming symptom-wise. And so caught a ride to the next aid station and got driven down. Met my wife, went to the ER, got a bunch of blood tests, and ultimately it was like probably a stomach virus that then, with effort, resulted in burst blood vessels low down in your GI tract. Excuse me. So nothing serious, but worth going and getting checked out because, I mean, you don't want to be entering early stage kidney failure in the middle of 50 miles. So it was.
Is that like what? Because I'm curious. Like, yeah, with you, it was. I guess you said a virus that with exercise caused the blood. But what is like a serious? Did the doctors in the ER tell you anything more? Like what potentially could have been going wrong?
No, I mean, there's like internal hemorrhoids you can get, like low down in your colon. And so if those burst, then it's like more worrying, I guess, if it's actually less bloody and like only a little bit bloody, because then it's like happening higher up in your GI tract. But typically stuff that's like adding blood lower down in your GI tract is not as serious. So, and then they did a bunch of blood tests to look at kidney function and that sort of thing. And I was just fine in that regard. So the most likely option is cause is the stomach virus. But yeah, I mean, sort of an unknown because they can't, it's not like they can get a look at exactly what was happening. So, but it's just one of those things that it just happens. And it was strange in the moment and kind of alarming. And I was also having lower back pain that sort of pointed to like my kidneys hurting.
Yeah.
And then that just turned out to be just muscular discomfort that, was gone in a day. So it was just a number of factors that contributed to me making that decision. But I would still do the same thing. I mean, my wife said afterwards, like, yeah, if you'd finished that race, having those symptoms the whole time, I would have been kind of mad. It's like that's sort of irresponsible to not take care of yourself like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. When you have alarming signs like that, to call it a day, a finish isn't worth your physical health.
For sure.
So how did you feel? Because I know you talked about when you came on earlier how, your Tahoe 200 DNF was a little bit tougher to handle. So it sounds like here you are, another race, another DNF this year that I know you weren't planning on. How'd you feel post this race?
I mean, obviously still disappointed, but less disappointed than with Tahoe just because, I mean, I had signed up for DC Peaks 50 with it being just sort of for fun and the more than like, this is what my goal for my career in running is focusing on the 200s and longer stuff like that. And so the 50 I'm doing for fun. So there's that aspect to it. And then also, I mean, I don't want to say that like I'm ever going to be accepting of failure in the sense that like I'm going to start holding myself to some kind of standard wherein I'm okay not finishing races. But it's like, this one, it was just totally outside of my control.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what I could have done differently. Yeah. Like getting a stomach virus a day or two before a race and then having this happen is just such a fluke, Yeah. So I don't know. It's not like my training was messed up or I was like mentally weak in that moment. And so it was pretty easy to convince the crazy person inside of my brain to forgive me for that one.
I like that description because we all have that person inside of our brain.
Anyone who's an ultra runner, I feel like, can recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your point there. There's no reason to beat yourself up over something you can't control.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it was fun to see you out there on the live stream, even though it only lasted there for the first few hours. But anyways, so glad you're back at it. You're feeling better. So today, though, what I wanted to talk to you about, Kilian, is this is one of our Pillars of Ultra Running episodes where we talk about, the essential things that come with that have to be done in order to complete 100 miles. And I've been reaching out to different coaches and asking them like what topics they feel passionate about in this area of what athletes need to be doing in order to, as they train for their first 100 miler. You came back with something that I haven't had a coach come back with yet, because I asked each coach what they feel most passionate about. Well, you sent a few topics back, but one of them was speed work. Why why speed work?
So it's not something that you typically think about and connect to ultra distance running. And I'm not going to necessarily argue that it's, absolutely essential if you want to finish a given race. It might be actually absolutely essential to finish a race like a Leadville. It's got a faster cutoff depending on someone's pace. Like if someone tends to be on the slower side, increasing that pace is going to make finishing that race much, much easier. But my argument for having pretty much everybody do speed work, I could think of a few exceptions if someone was particularly injury prone or had a hamstring tear that they were recovering from in their recent past, because if you're doing speed work on flats, you're putting more stress on those muscles. But what speed work is going to do is, one, it's going to give you something to do that's low volume that has a high payback from for the training adaptations. So I've used this analogy when talking to clients that like all the zone 1, zone 2 stuff, so low heart rate, longer or higher volume, longer mileage and time on feet, all that stuff is like putting money into a checking account or a high yield savings account or something like that. Safe, nothing is going to go wrong with that money, and you're just banking stuff for the future. And speed work is kind of going to diversify your portfolio, and you're investing in slightly higher risk stock options. So you're putting, but you're going to get a higher return from those things typically, if you're investing intelligently. And so it's not like I'm saying you need to do speed work, or I would say you need to do speed work all the time, and not even every week necessarily, but especially towards the beginning of plans, what speed work can do is really quickly increase your baseline cardiovascular endurance. And so it will make you, like short intervals, which is what I have people do a lot of the time, will increase if you just go for a 10-mile run and you're staying zone 1, zone 2, it can increase your neutral pace by a lot really quickly. So if you're running 9-minute miles for that 10-mile run at the beginning of a training plan, within 4 weeks with 3 purposeful speed workouts spaced throughout those 4 weeks, you can bump your pace down to 830s pretty quickly. And it's just because you're increasing, like the heart rate at which you're going to be running a faster pace is going to be similar to your heart rate at which you were running a slower pace, because those adaptations both happen faster, and it's just a totally different stimuli than most people have added into training plans for longer events. I hope I made sense in that answer.
No, that's all. It's like I like your savings account. You're putting money into it, but why don't we put some money into some stocks that can grow exponentially really fast, and give a higher yield. So with that though, I guess take stocks for example. You could potentially lose money in that.
Totally.
So like, can you overdo it? Like the speed work lead to injury? I guess. See, because how do you balance? I guess is more what I'm getting at. When you are presented with an athlete and say that they want to run 100 miles, say first time 100-mile runner, decent athlete, got a decent base under them, but they're ready to move it up another step. They've done a 50-miler, they're ready to go bigger. How do you plan in speed work into like those long mileage weeks? Like, is it like a build up? You do 1 a week, 2 workouts a week? How do you basically, how do you go about building speed work into a plan?
So I would say rarely am I having anyone do more than 1 speed workout a week. And often, so most often how I'm structuring a training plan is like 3 weeks where you're building in a week that's easier. That's just kind of your most basic. So it's more flexible than that, but let's just imagine that for a second. And so more often than not, I'll have someone do a speed workout the first week and the third week. And then the second week, you won't be doing a speed workout. Because like investing in stocks as opposed to putting money in a high yield savings account, it is riskier. So speed work can lead to injury, and if you overdo it, can have negative consequences. So it's important to recognize those things. And with like that profile of an athlete that you just laid out that has a good base, has done a 50-miler, that's the type of person who I would think would be ready for speed work. And so there we would start with small intervals. And so one of the workouts that I like to do for myself and that I have had athletes do with great success is just 10 30 by 30 repeats, where 30 seconds you're going at like a 9 or a 10 effort level, and then 30 seconds easy. And you can split that up into 2 groups of 5 with some rest in between, which if someone has done no speed work ever, that's probably what I'm going to do. And then as you progress, like for myself, when I do that workout, it's 2 sets of 10 intervals. And so these are really short intervals, so you're reducing your risk of injury by just reducing the amount of time that you're working super hard. I also almost always recommend people do this on a track or a road that like doesn't have a lot of potholes. You know, you don't want to be jumping up on curbs. You don't really want to be doing these on trail, because you can do other speed workouts on trail, but for stuff that's going to be at like that 9 or a 10 effort level, okay, I say like even a treadmill or a track, something like that is really helpful in order to reduce risk. But if you get people working at that level, so you're having really fast training adaptations, like endurance adaptations typically take about 2 weeks to show improvements. So your zone 1, zone 2 longer efforts are going to take about 2 weeks to really start giving you benefits. But speed workout can be 5 to 7 days. So you can notice the improvement from, like if you do an interval workout on a Monday, the next Monday, people will often say, oh, I felt way better, because you've already had training adaptations 1 week to the next. And so structuring those into plans and reducing the risk of this somewhat riskier workout, so you don't put speed workout close to your long days. You know, if I'll typically put a speed workout after a lift, like if someone's plan, like their week starts on a Monday, and I've had people whose schedules have to shift around. Like I've worked with firefighters and stuff who have like 4 days on, 2 days off. So it's never going to be super consistent exactly what day it's on. But like whatever day you're kind of starting your plan for that week, the way that I like to have it done is that someone will lift in the morning and do the speed workout after, because lifting has a delayed onset muscle soreness effect. So you're not going to feel super muscularly tired from your lift immediately after that. And then you'll be pretty warmed up for the speed workout. If, you know, you're going out on a long 10-mile run or 2-hour run, something like that, you don't really need to warm up. But for intense exercises like the speed workouts, you definitely do. And so incorporating a warm up and making sure that like everything's firing right is super important, as opposed to kind of the zone 1 or 2 runs. If someone doesn't feel good that day, like if they didn't get enough sleep, not worth doing the speed workout. So with kind of managing risk in these training plans, the only way I want people to be doing speed workouts is if they're going to get the most from it. So if they're feeling a little bit sick or they didn't get sleep the night before, it's like we can move this around. And so basically just intelligently placing the workout so it's not going to affect the long runs, which are the most important thing for finishing a 100-miler, but then also getting the training adaptations to where your cardio can be boosted really quickly. I think that's kind of the best way to get the benefits from these types of short, intense workouts.
Do you keep it at one speed workout for most of the training plan?
It kind of depends.
Like per week?
So some people really like speed workouts.
Okay.
And so if a person really enjoys them, we can keep them in as close to a week-ish out from a race, or 2 weeks out, depending on what the race is. But for most people, I would say, like ideally, I think you have about 4 months to train for, a 100-miler.
Like a 16-weekish plan.
Something like that. Yeah. And so if you have those 4 months, for the first 8 weeks or thereabouts, we might be doing the speed workouts, and then we might drop them. You know, as the volume goes up and you're more and more tired with doing bigger and bigger weeks, longer runs, we might take the speed workouts out and add in a zone 3 run. So kind of a run that's 7 miles or an hour or thereabouts, but a little bit harder or something like that, but not quite as intense as a 9 or a 10 effort level. And so again, you're kind of managing risk like that. But if someone really likes speed workouts, I'll keep them around. For me personally, I like to put them at the beginning of plans, because you're getting that real cardio boost as you then if you think about you're like stacking blocks, like I mentioned, those training adaptations for the speed workouts are happening faster than the endurance adaptations. So if you put them at the beginning of the plan, you're getting maximal benefit from them for the rest of the plan.
Yeah.
As those endurance adaptations also add on top of that because they take longer.
So that makes perfect sense. You're going a little harder in the beginning. So like if they're like, let's go to like our peak mileage weeks where we're hitting some of our highest mileage before the race. Are you throwing in, and when you say zone 3, is that like a tempo run sort of thing where you're going, where
Yeah,
you're
like
just pushing it a little faster than normal?
you don't want to be entering kind of where you're building up a bunch of lactic acid. And so
Yeah.
what I would think of as a zone 3 run is something that you can maintain consistency for at least an hour. Most people probably a little bit more if they were really, really willing to push. But yeah, and so that often I'll have faster runs towards the end of training programs be kind of optional. Like if someone wakes up and they feel great and all they have is 7 miles scheduled for that day and they've got a couple days till their longest run of the week and they want to do that run fast, you're going to get some good adaptations from that. But typically and it depends on the individual too, because I've worked with people who want to be running 100-mile weeks, and I've worked with people who can only run 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And so they're not getting 100-mile weeks. You know what I mean? So it depends on the volume we're doing, as in addition to, how that individual person's preferences end up working out. But when you're getting towards the higher volume, in addition to kind of reducing speed work, the strength training becomes a little bit less of an emphasis. Like lots of things start to become less of an emphasis as the running specifically takes on more of an emphasis.
Okay.
Like the time on feet, high mileage running.
Yeah. Would you say for athletes who aren't getting as high mileage weeks because they can only run 3 or 4 days a week, would you say it's even more important for them to do speed work?
I would say it would be even more beneficial for sure.
Okay.
And I think you can probably, if you're not, depending on what that person's lifestyle is like, because I have worked with a few people who have had really high stress jobs. And so, and they have, kids and a family. And so their only free time is the 4 runs a week. And so if they're kind of run down in the rest of their life, maybe speed work towards the end of a program isn't what we're going to be focusing on, and we're just going to be focusing on being fresh. But if the person can run 4 times a week and their life isn't also super intense and stressful, then I would say definitely having speed work go a little longer into the plan makes sense, because that way you're getting helpful benefits from a more intense workout. Plus, you can add in the high volume without paying really any penalties throughout the rest of your week, given that you're not training 6 or 7 days a week.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense there. And then as you said earlier, I was wondering about this, like with speed work and breaking it up between like the track or the road and the trail. You're saying anything that's like 9 or 10, we're gonna keep it to as smooth surfaces because we don't want rolled ankles.
Yeah.
What kind of, is it just mainly tempo runs that you'll have them do on the trails on the speed side?
So it depends on what people have access to. Like where I live, I've got a trail called Serpent's Trail that's like a double wide Jeep road, not technical at all. And I've done some really intense speed workouts on that road where it climbs like 700 feet in a mile and a half. So you get some good elevation, and that can be really helpful. But if people don't have access to something that's really low technicality, that's got some like hills or even just like rolling hills, then I'd say keeping it completely flat is probably the way to go. Definitely, if you have access to a treadmill, you can add in some incline work on the treadmill and that sort of thing. But if your access to trails is kind of mostly semi-technical trails that you could easily catch a toe or roll an ankle on, then I'd say mostly keeping it to tempo runs, faster efforts, but not that like 9 or 10 level all out lactic acid building up kind of workout is probably better, just because, again, it's like managing the risk level with what inputs you're kind of trying to get into a training plan. Like that super high effort stuff with loose rocks. It's just like a recipe for disaster. And if you stop paying attention for 10 seconds, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, that's where the falls can come very easily while doing that. So I just got a couple other here, like more technical questions about speed work, and this might be a little bit embarrassing, but what's a fartlek?
Fartleks are
Because I hear that term thrown around in the speed work world. No, I honestly don't even know what it is.
yeah, fartleks are like that you can kind of do them differently, but they're accelerations within longer runs, basically. So you can kind of do them like when I was a swimmer in college, and we used to do them as like you'd swim 1,000 yards, and you would have 200 yards that were like at an 8 out of 10 effort level, and then 50 that's a little easier. And so you can kind of think of them like if you're out doing a 10-mile fartlek, you can break them down differently, but you can do like 2 miles, 1 mile, and do like 2 miles much more intense, 1 mile easy, and kind of work up like that for that 10 miles. And so it's really kind of just a way of it's one of those terms that gets used to describe kind of this specific type of interval workout.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have could you give us few other examples of like speed workouts that runners can incorporate into their training plans?
So, I mentioned that interval workout. I like short intervals. I think are really good for people being introduced to speed workouts, just because one, anything at a 9 or a 10 level effort is very difficult, and so it's super good mental training when you're like out on a long run and you're like, okay, I might feel tired, but I don't feel like I did on interval number 5. So that's I think those short intervals, and then doing like an hour-long tempo run. So typically this workout will be an hour and 20 minutes because it'll involve a 10-minute workout or 10-minute warm-up and a 10-minute cool-down. And depending on what that person has done that day, could need a longer warm-up for sure. But hour and 20 minutes where the first 10 minutes you're warming up, you're getting a little over about a mile in, and you're doing some good accelerations within that mile. And then, a tempo run for an hour. You're kind of picking the pace that you can run consistently for that hour. It depends. If people have a heart rate monitor, I'll help them do this by going off a heart rate, but a lot of people don't have an accurate heart rate monitor, so I try to go based on perceived effort for most people. And so typically you're kind of like at a 7 on the perceived effort scale, so you're not going to feel like you're tying up with lactic acid, like really working to keep your form correct, but you're going to be working hard. Like the last 15 minutes of a tempo run should be pretty brutal, but it still shouldn't feel like that 9 or 10 effort level. And with the tempo run, the key is keeping it consistent. So you can do a tempo run on a trail, but you just want your energy level to be consistent for the entire hour, not necessarily the pace. But if you're doing a tempo run on flats, you want to pick a pace that you think you can do for that hour. And then the first time you do that workout, you're just setting a baseline and trying to improve from there. And then with the interval workouts, you can kind of do any length of intervals that you want to do. I've had people who've wanted to do pyramid workouts, and I've done them myself, where these are really just track based and they're super intense. So I don't put these anywhere close to anything else big that week. But I've done them, and I've had a couple athletes who wanted to try these, where you're just doing like a 400 as fast as you can go, a 400 easy, 800 as fast as you can go, 800 easy, all the way up to a mile and then back down. And so that's obviously like a super brutal, super intense workout. And
I like those ones.
Man, they're so hard. You get to like the first, you finish that mile and then you have to go back down. It's so rough.
Yeah.
But so you can work up and down that way. And then, we talked about fartleks, and you can kind of just do those types of accelerations within a run. So like I was mentioning earlier, if you just wake up one day and you feel really good and you have 10 miles scheduled for that day, or 2 hours, however someone programs it for you, within that, you can do 10 minutes more intense, 10 minutes easier. You could do 20 minutes more intense, 10 minutes easier, things like that. And so the nice thing about Speedwork is you can kind of fit it in however you want to. And it gives you this stimuli that you can add into, small to medium volume weeks fairly easily. That isn't going to add a ton of volume. So it's gonna be adding something different than the typical time on feet that we're aiming for training for ultras.
Yeah. And like as you say that, it makes me I by no means am no saint at doing my speed work, but every time I start to consistently throw it in, or even after like my first speed workout in a while, for me it's like how would I say it? Like I'll just say it like this. So with me, sometimes I don't want to go to church, but once I go to church in my life, I feel better. Even though I didn't really want to go at first, and then after I do it, I'm like, whoa, that was actually really good for me. I feel better about myself. That's how I feel about speed work. Like most of the time, right before it happens, I don't want to do it. I'm like, I just want to go out and enjoy 7 miles today. Like, I don't really need to. Like, I'm gonna run my 100-mile race at a 15-minute mile pace anyways. So why do I need to do this? But then I've noticed, like, once I get going into a speed workout, honestly, I feel it helps with burnout.
For sure.
Mental, because you can get mentally so fatigued about going the same time, same distance, same effort of run, so many hours, And then when I do a speed workout, it's all of a sudden it throws in a challenge where it's like, ooh, I got a challenge here. Like I'm ready to hit this harder. It's a totally different form of running that I feel just gives you a mental boost that you weren't really expecting to have.
Yeah, I mean, I really I resonate with what you said about speed work. Like, I never want to do it. I like before I go out and do, like, especially if it's those short intervals at really high effort, I'm like kind of scared sometimes because it's going to be really painful and it's going to be uncomfortable. And I'm like, man, I like you said, I could go just do a 5-mile run in the sun and it's going to feel great. But no, it's one of those things that you finish and you feel so good afterwards. Like, you have put in work that's going to get you gains, in the near term future. Like, you will see results quickly. And that's really satisfying. I agree that it can help with burnout. Like, one of my advertisements for speed work to my clients is just, it's something different. Like, you are going to spend a lot of time doing the same thing over and over and over again. And this can add in a little bit of variety. Plus, I mean, how often do ultra runners really get the chance to open up the stride,
Yeah.
Like, kind of feel like you're running fast.
Yeah.
It can be a cool experience, especially on the days where it goes well, you look down at your watch afterwards and you're like, okay, my fastest interval last week was I was running 5-minute mile pace for the 30 seconds, and my fastest interval this week I was running 4:40 pace for 30 seconds. Like, you see those big differences, and it's super rewarding.
Oh yeah, I've had some moments where, like, me and my wife will go out and do a speed workout, and I'll come back and I'll just be pumped out of my mind.
Yeah,
like, I forgot I could run. Like, I can run, and like I actually felt wind in my face, and it was from me moving, not the actual wind. Like, anyways, so so why do you think so many runners don't do it?
I think partly because it's scary. Like, the first time you do a speed workout, it's probably going to hurt in some very new ways that, your long runs haven't. The burn in your lungs, that kind of the taste in the back of your throat that you can get at those really high effort levels can be unpleasant. And so I think there's like this it's kind of like, when you're a kid and like your parents drink coffee or something like that, and like you taste coffee as a kid and you're like, ugh, this is gross. And then just like, and that's just an example.
Why would I want to do that?
Yeah. And so you grow up and you're like, okay, I get it now. I do like waking up in the morning with a cup of coffee, whatever it is. But it's
Yeah.
like this thing that has you have to kind of pay a price to enter the world where you're getting gains from speed workouts. And that price is being uncomfortable for however long those workouts last. But it's like you see those gains so quickly that it's pretty easy once people do it, even just for 2 weeks, to convince them that this is valuable, because you see the gains really quickly. Whereas with endurance stuff, the long runs at low effort level, you don't see those gains as quickly. And so that's what, like, if we're training for ultras, that's what we want to do. So it doesn't matter as much really whether you're seeing those gains so quickly. But even for people who don't care about being competitive in races that I've worked with, I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't want to improve. And so it's like no one is trying to run 100 miles because they're happy with the baseline. You know, we're all kind of in this sport to challenge ourselves one way or another. And whether or not the end result is I want to be faster, it's like I want to be more efficient. I want to finish this feeling more comfortable. And so, you know, adding in stimuli that people aren't used to and what they haven't done before is a really an easy way to make those improvements without just cranking up mileage.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. We want to improve, and I know, you know, when I've gone out and when you hit a race, like especially if it's a distance or course that you've hit before, you want to be able to feel like you're stronger out
For
there
sure.
this time around. And you know, one thing that I've kind of, I think you've hit on this a little bit, but with speed work, I've heard some people classify speed work into kind of the same classification as strength work. What do you like? Are those two things related? Like you were saying that you suggest actually doing a strength workout and then going out and doing a speed workout. Can a speed work replace strength, or would you say no, you still need to do your strength and you need to do your speed work?
So I would not replace strength with anything. Strength workouts are the only thing I would recommend universally to adults, period, whether or not they're runners at all. Strength workouts are the only things that actually strengthen your joints, increase bone density, rather than do the opposite. Like even with our long runs, we are doing damage to things in our bodies. You know, that damage is good in the sense that our bodies build back stronger. But strength work, you know, you're making the micro tears in your muscles to build muscle, but you are strengthening your bones, you're strengthening your joints. And so that's like a non-negotiable for me with my training and for the clients I work with, is we are going to do strength work. And strength work is going to be like, I tell people, if they have to skip strength work or running on any given day, you skip running, because the strength workout is only a positive. Like, all running carries some risk with it, and obviously strength work does too. You can pull a muscle doing anything, but like strength work is the stuff that is the foundation of your house that you're building, as far as trying to finish anything. And more than trying to finish a race, it's like strength work is the foundation that's building your body for the future. Like, it's especially important for older runners, like anyone over 30. If you're over 40, absolutely a must, like have to be doing strength work. This is the only thing that's like holding you together. And so I would not say like speed work can't replace strength work. But the reason I put speed work after strength on any given day is that, if it's a week where the person's going to be moving up in weight a whole bunch and things like that, we might shift it around so that the speed work's not right after that strength work. But if it's a week that's not a huge build week for strength training, then all that strength work is doing is warming you up for the speed work. And you might be sore from the strength work tomorrow, but you're not going to be sore from the strength work right after it, because it has, unlike running, it has that delayed onset muscle soreness. And so, yeah, I do think they can work in conjunction like that. I really like pairing them together, because the strength workout is a natural warm up for the speed stuff. You know, I still include a running warm up But yeah, hopefully
Do not
that answered your question.
replace
Yeah, don't replace
strength
strength
with
work.
speed. Yeah, that was ultimately what I was
Yeah,
asking. Like, so they are separate, different benefits from each one.
yeah, and I mean they're complementary in the sense that they will like the most important part of finishing 100 miles is doing longer runs. Like you can't get away from that. Longer, like getting used to time on feet is the most important thing. But strength work is the most important supplementary activity, and then speed work is just another supplementary activity that you can add into to kind of, optimize your training program.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, and maybe I just misunderstood when I heard that, but the way you explained that does make perfect sense. And going back to my earlier question, I just wanted to share this and share my experience here. I asked, like, why don't people do it? And honestly, I didn't do it before because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know, like, how long. I looked up some workouts online and I do them sporadically, but I really didn't realize how to build them in to my workout, and just about the workout, how hard to push on some of these speed workouts, until I got a coach who built me out a plan for one of my 100-milers, because I did my first couple 100-milers, I did basically zero speed work. I take that back. I did some on my first, but it was very sporadic. Second one, I didn't do any. And then my third one, I got a coach. And I tell you what, Kilian, it was enlightening having a coach build in speed work. And honestly, he didn't even have to explain a lot of it. Like, obviously, the workout was explained in the way he gave it to me, but as I started to do that, it just made perfect sense in my mind. I didn't even have to meet with him to ask him questions about it, because you just start seeing the benefits and where it's coming in and how it's coming in and the repetitive nature of it. And it helped me realize, like, whoa, like, this is essential. And not only is it essential, it's fun, and the benefits are just amazing to have this thrown in. So that would, honestly, I know you're a coach, Kilian, and I would all tell any of our listeners, if they've never hired a coach, if they can, at least through one training process, like, it's just so enlightening when you hire a coach and just have everything planned out and someone to ask all these questions to. It gives you a lot more confidence for the future, even if you do have to do it on your own later.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think one of the reasons that more people don't do it is just that it's intimidating. And it's hard to know. One thing that everyone is learning all the time is, like, how hard can you push your body before things actually start to break down in a negative way? And, like, nobody's perfect at that. I guarantee, Jim Walmsley doesn't have the perfect answer for himself to that question. But for someone new, doing speed work seems to push on that limit far too much. And so I can totally understand kind of having some apprehension approaching something like that without the guidance of someone who has, been through it themselves and kind of can actually explain a little bit of it from just, doesn't even have to be a scientific perspective, but just like this is an okay risk to take perspective. Yeah. It's like, it's going back to the financial analogy. It's like having a financial advisor for, like, I could just invest in some random stock and it's just I'm just basically placing a bet. But it's like having the person there to guide that decision-making process is definitely pretty helpful.
Yeah, that 100%. And I see it as, like I said, that one 16-week training plan session with my coach has helped me out. Even I've gone some time since then without a coach, but I felt more confident in my abilities to implement speed work since then. So that, like, you're not just paying for the plan and those weeks of coaching, but that knowledge goes with you forever.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people too, it's like I think when you work with a coach for a couple months, you kind of start to understand their philosophy pretty quick, because ultimately a training program is pretty repetitious in the sense that it's like, it's evolving at this predictable rate. But really what I feel like having a coach is particularly beneficial for is when unexpected things happen in training plans. because
Yes.
when I was first training for ultras, I like when stuff happened, I just didn't have anyone to ask a question to. And I mean, I'm always honest with my clients. If they ask me a question and I don't know the answer, if they're having some kind of pain and I can't help with that, I'm like, go see a PT. You know, I'm very happy to say, like, this is not within my area of expertise, but you have someone who can help you rearrange your training program if life events come up and interrupt it. You have someone who, you know, has been through a lot of the possible conflicts and challenges that can arise when you're reaching like the outer limits of your ability to adapt to this training program. And so it's like, it's really, once you get the hang of how the training is progressing, it's so much less about the actual plan than improvising around unforeseen challenges, because there is never a 16-week training plan that where you follow everything exactly to the T, how it's been laid out. You know, it's like, that's just too long of a period of time for everything to go perfectly. And so the coach is like really there to help improvise around the situations where things don't go perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so often what I see is when people don't have a coach and they're very new and they don't really know what they're doing, that's where the dream, that race day dream, it dies halfway through their training plan when things go awry and they don't know how to deal with it. So yeah, anyways, I agree with you. And yeah, I used to be a guy who just went out there and did it on my own and didn't think that I don't need to pay money for a coach. But I tell you what, it's helped tremendously, and it gives you so much more peace of mind. And I think with Speedwork, you can learn so much from a coach, just like what we're learning from you today. So, Kilian, just we hit Speedwork pretty hard here. And before I let you go, though, you mentioned something else in our email correspondence before we talked. I want to pivot here. You talked about, you know, some of the topics you were most passionate about were ultras and what it takes to run any ultra distance. But you said that, and there's this theme that goes on in the ultra world, that you have to know your why. Because if you don't know your why, then when you're out there and things get tough, you're going to fold. You hear that a lot. Know your why before you run these great distances. But you said in my email with you, you mentioned that you had started this thought process that the whole know your why thing seems overrated to you. So that's the first time I've ever heard that from anyone. Tell me why you think that. What's been going through your head about this topic?
So to qualify real quick, I do think that there are people who I've met in the community and you'll hear about who have very salient whys. So if there's plenty of people in the ultra world where they'll talk about how ultra running saved them from addiction and that kind of thing. And if that is your why, like if your why works for you, I'm not trying to take that away or say don't use it. You know what I mean? And there's people who have ultra running connects them somehow religiously. And if that's your why and it works for you, that's awesome. What my point is like, so if you take me personally, because I know my why, I don't have one. It doesn't make sense. Like if I think about why in the middle of a race, why am I doing this? I have literally no answer. I'm just like, this seems stupid. Like I'm at mile 210 of Cocodona and my feet hurt.
You have pneumonia.
Everything hurts. Yeah. Like I can barely breathe. And like, so if there's it like the why has never once helped me. What I think is more practical is to expect yourself to have strategies for dealing with low moments. And so instead of having this super salient why, like know how your brain works and responds to triggers for motivation. So I've always said about myself that if I was a racehorse, I would need to be whipped. Like I would be the horse that needed urging on in that specific way. And so like, if someone like, if someone needs to sit down and talk to me and be like, you did not come here to fail, like tough love type stuff is going to work for me. I have on the wall of my home gym, I have two sayings spray painted One is discipline is freedom, and the other is wolves don't concern themselves with the opinions of sheep. I'm not a hunter. I'm not like this uber masculine gym bro, but those two things somehow just worm their way into my brain, and they help me do my strength training in the morning when I don't want to do it. And so instead of trying to find this like cosmic answer for why am I out here running multiple days across this godforsaken continent, like have strategies to deal with those moments. And ultra running ultimately is this, I think, super practical sport where you just have to use what works. And so things that have worked for me in the past, like in Cocodona, the year that I had those breathing issues, I just kept telling myself, I am the task, and the task cannot feel pain. So I'm just moving forward. It's like, I don't really exist, And like that helped me for a while. When I was pacing a client this year in Leadville, I just told him about, he was suffering, and I started talking to him about Stoic philosophy and how Marcus Aurelius wrote way back in the Roman Empire about being the rock that the waves crash upon. The waves do not affect the rock. It's calm in the storm. And somehow me going on about esoteric philosophy helped my client like push through. We sped up as he was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So it's like, if you have this salient why that motivates you, that's cool. But I think a lot of people probably don't have something that they can really reach back to. And this ties into a little bit about what we were talking about, what you were just talking about like people getting without a coach or very new to the sport, getting kind of bogged down in the middle of a training plan. Because the why is this, like the overemphasis on the why question, I think goes hand in hand with our overemphasis on motivation. Like we think of motivation as this thing where like that's what's going to get you through the plan. And that's not what's going to get you through the plan. I wake up so many days and I am not motivated. Like I don't want to go do the work that I have to do that day in order to be successful 3 months from now. Especially with stuff like strength training. Like I can typically motivate myself for my long run because that's what I enjoy. But just sometimes for a 7-mile easy run or strength training or speed work, it's like the motivation might not be there. But what gets you through is discipline and consistency and the ability to overcome those low motivation moments. And so you can hold yourself accountable in various ways. And that's kind of what you're doing instead of what I see myself doing instead of having this really salient why, is having these strategies where I talk to myself and be like, this is what you want to do. Regardless of whether or not you know why you want to do it. It's like, this is the thing you have set out to do. So how are we going to fix your negativity in this moment in order to have the best chance of success?
Like, this is who you are sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, as you say that, it honestly, it makes perfect sense. And when you said that in an email, I started thinking about it. I was like, okay. Because I remember going back to my second 100. My first 100, like, I'd heard that so much. Know your why. So, I feel like I did have a why on my first 100. But then, and my why, honestly, was just to prove to myself that I wasn't a quitter.
Yeah.
So that, and then my second 100, though, I'm like, okay, I've already done it. I know I can do it. Like, what's really motivating me? Like, I'm not a quitter. I followed the process through, right? Already once. And I remember, though, as like you're talking about finding your strategies to keep you going. I remember on my second 100, I got to that point. Everyone does. Why am I here? What am I doing? I just threw up. I still have 20 miles left. And now I have to go to an 11,000-foot peak. It was the Ute 100, kind of over by where you live in the Manti La Sal's. 11,000-foot peak, and I can't even get any calories down in me. Like, what am I doing? Like, and I remember, though, I worked at, and my listeners have heard this story before, but I worked at scout camps as a youth, and a cheesy scout camp song, and like in scouting, they always preached like honor was a big thing that you were taught. Honor, like it's in the scout oath and in the scout law, and they have they have songs, little campfire songs where you sing about it. And one of the campfire songs came to my head, and the first two lines are just, "On my honor, I will try." And those lines just hit home. And I'm like, that's who I am. Like, I have honor, and so I'm going to try I'm not quitting, I'm giving everything I have. On my honor, I will try. It's might hit home to me like the Wolves quote hits home with you. And so, yeah, I like what you say. It makes perfect sense because I didn't have a great why to be out there climbing that peak. But in my head, I was out there. I have honor, and so because I have honor, I'm going to try my best when I don't want to do this per se in the moment.
Yeah, totally. It's just this, I think we kind of just place this over importance a little bit on the like grander question. And if you just get a little bit more granular and not so zoomed out, it's like, what's going to work for you in the moment that you're low, And I'm sure that some people's overall why question does work for them, but I know for me, and I know for at least a few people that I've worked with, and definitely people I've paced, it's like, there's no why. Like, I can come up with whys if I'm like sitting here in a podcast. Like, one of the things that I think is cool about ultra running is that we used to be persistence hunters when we were hunting woolly mammoths, and we would just chase woolly mammoths until they were too tired to move. Like, okay, so cool. We're the best endurance animals on the planet. Like, that's not going to work for me when I'm suffering. Yeah. That's not something that my brain is going to be capable of computing and like transforming into motivational fuel in the moment. It's it's the practical strategy that you really have to have. And so I guess it's like less of an overrated thing, and it's just like it's more of the conversation to me seems like it could, if someone like was approaching the sport and they didn't have this why, but they still wanted to do it, it's like, oh, well, am I really going to be successful if I don't have this grander reason? And it's like, no, focus on the things you can control. And it's like, there are the physical building blocks and there are the mental building blocks. And I just don't think that one of the mental building blocks needs to be this like grand connection to something in order to motivate you to do this hard thing. It's like, it can be simpler than that.
And to back you up on this, 2 weekends ago, I paced and crewed my father-in-law to his first 100-mile finish. And I remember Melody, my wife, she asked him, "So what's your why? Why are you doing this?" This was a couple months ago. Like, as we were game planning for the race, like, "We're going to be out there crewing you. Like, what's your why? So we know, what's motivating you." And he literally, I give my father-in-law due respect. I remember him looking at Melody and being like, I guess I'll have to think about that one, And he's in the middle of his training plan. He's 2 months out. And I remember both Melody and I kind of looked at each other. We're like, he doesn't have a why. And we're like, how's this going to go down? And honestly, he ran that thing like a champ. There never was a moment of doubt that he wasn't going to finish.
That's awesome.
The man plugged away. He just went one aid station at a time. He plugged away. I was so impressed. And it didn't seem like he had a big grand why, because when we asked him what it was, he never got back with us on what the why was. So anyway, he went and did it. And I think he just knew, like, hey, I want to do this. This is who I am. And I'm just going to work on, like what you said, having the strategies ready there so that I can keep moving forward even when it sucks.
Yeah. And everybody's strategies are going to be somewhat different from each other. Like, my wife is currently training for a half marathon, and she does not respond to the tough love strategies. And so it's like, you have to tailor those, like, on the coaching side of things. It's interesting to kind of figure out what people respond to. And that's just a question that I typically ask up front, especially if they're coming to me with like some race experience. I'm like, what motivates you? Like, what do you use to do this, so that if I'm there in a moment with them, I can, help with that. But it's like, instead of finding your why, it's like, find the cheat code in your brain that restarts your mindset when you start to get negative. It's like rebooting a computer, or it's turning on and off the oven or something like that.
As you say that, it's like we shouldn't be asked. Melody and I asked my father-in-law the wrong question. We shouldn't have asked him, what's your why? We should have asked him, what strategies should we use in order to help you keep moving, or are you planning on using in order to help you keep moving through those low moments?
Yeah, I think that's a more practical question, you know?
Yeah. Anyways, well, I honestly, that was a great topic. I think those are great thoughts, and honestly, I think they're really essential. And it's good to know, and it's almost relieving, I think, to know I don't have to have a grand why to run this race.
Yeah, totally.
And I can just get out there. Let's just be strategic about it. What motivates me, what helps me keep moving when I'm low, and let's just focus on that, and we'll get the job done. So
yeah.
Anyways, Kilian, thank you so much for joining me today here for a second time. This has been awesome. Honestly, been very enlightening for me. I know that our listeners will appreciate this. And so if our listeners do want to find you and reach out to you, if they have any other questions, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram is the only real social media I have, and it's at Run Tough Coaching, just spelled how it sounds. My coaching website's runtoughcoaching.com. And then you can either message me on Instagram, or you can also email me, the coaching website. If you go there and scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a little contact me email too. And so, yeah, if you ever want to reach out, just have questions, or if you're interested in coaching, I'm always happy to chat with people. And I love working with people running their first hundreds. I've worked with people who are doing their first marathons, kind of anything.
First 200s as well.
Yeah,
right?
First 200s for sure. I did have an athlete last year do his first 200 and place sixth at the Moab 240. So it's really successful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a fun thing for me to be able to do, to just like play a role in helping people achieve their goals. And yeah, it's awesome. So if anyone's ever interested, always feel free to reach out. And yeah, I'm always here.
And I'll just give my plug, Kilian, from our conversations both on air and just separately. I've been thoroughly impressed with you. So for our listeners out there, if you are looking for a coach, I would recommend you. You've been one of my top coaches that I've been able to talk with through this podcasting experience. So
thanks.
You
Jacob.
got my endorsement, anyways. But want to just say thanks again for coming on the podcast. For our listeners, do you have any plans for like next year? I know racing season's kind of winding down as winter's coming up. What are your plans moving forward?
Yeah, so I actually do have a race November 9th in Vegas. It's 100K, the Red Rock 100K. It's just kind of something I signed up for, again, for fun. And then I'm going to enter my off season. But next year I'm doing the Triple Crown of 200. So I've got Tahoe, Bigfoot, and Moab all on the calendar. And I'm not going to add or subtract anything from that. It will be those three. And I'm going to get them done this year. So yeah, that's the plan. I've actually got a client I'm working with right now, and that's her plan too. So it'll be cool to kind of train along with her for that. And yeah, pretty exciting. I am just going to continue to believe that my bad luck this year was mostly fluke, and mostly a fluke, and it's all got to turn around at some point. So I'm definitely excited to approach 2025 with some lessons learned and improvements to be made, and always excited for a new racing season. So,
well, I hope it goes well for you. Excited to see how that goes.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, for sure. You ask great questions.
So that was a great conversation with Kilian. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Check his coaching out. The links are down in the show notes. Seems just like a great stand-up guy, and I'm just so grateful that he was able to come on the podcast today. As I thought about my conversation with Kilian, overall, my takeaways just really come down to, like, Speedwork makes sense. It really does. And like, why we don't get Speedwork in, I think it does come down to we just don't know how to get it in. And like, as I think about my conversation with Kilian, like, I am terrible. I'm not going to lie, guys. I am terrible at getting my Speedwork in. But every time I do start to get it in consistently, like Kilian said, I see strides in my times go down dramatically, and I just feel better. I feel stronger. And I almost feel more fired up about running, because who doesn't love improvement? It can be addicting. And so I would invite you, if you're feeling kind of that dull when you're running, to if you're not doing speed work, to make sure you implement that. And honestly, what I'm going to do right now, I don't have a coach, but I'm going to go look up some Speedwork workouts. I'm going to pick 3 or 4 that I can cycle through. And like Kilian said, you just need one a week. And then when he said that, that just made it seem so simple and easy. 1 time a week, do some intervals, whatever it is, and or whatever workout, your fartlek, whatever it might entail. Pick a few workouts, start cycling through them. Make sure you get 1 a week, and it's going to add some more zip to our training. It's going to make us feel more proud of ourselves, because we're feeling quicker, we feel faster, we feel like we pushed ourselves on our run. So anyways, that's going to be a big goal of mine, especially as I'm in the off season right now, but that's a great time to start getting used to doing speed work, so that when I start getting into some higher miles, the speed work doesn't beat me down as much. So anyways, that was my big takeaway. Also loved his thoughts about the why is overrated. Honestly, I think I agree with him. I think we have to have a why to a point, but also to a point, you just need to have strategies to know how to keep moving forward when it sucks. And ultimately, that's what's going to get you through 100 miles, is having a strategy to keep moving forward. So anyways, big thank you to Kilian. Thank you, each one of you, for listening to the podcast today. And remember, if you want to run 100 miles, make it happen.
Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100?